Lucille Ball is considered one of comedy's greatest legends, forever synonymous with her 6-season 50s sitcom I Love Lucy, co-starring her real-life husband Desi Arnaz. But the actress didn't exactly have an easygoing life. Here's the tragic real-life story of Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was born on August 6, 1911 in Western New York, the daughter of Desiree Hunt and her husband Henry Ball. According to Lucille's autobiography Love Lucy, the family relocated to Montana, where Henry was working as a telephone company lineman. Not long after, the family left for Michigan when the future star was about 3. Ball remembered her father as a wonderful guy and also claimed she got her sense of humor and love of slapstick comedy from him.
Here she comes!
She adored her father, but the same year they moved to the suburbs of Detroit, he came down with a case of the flu. Her mother was pregnant with Lucille's younger brother at the time and incredibly stressed about her husband, so she would tie Lucille up in the yard with a dog leash to keep her under control. Ball wrote, "Every time somebody would pass by on the sidewalk, I'd beg to be released." Unfortunately for Henry, before he had a chance to recover, a storm suddenly hit their neighborhood. As a telephone lineman, he continued to climb poles in sleet and snow, working hard to keep communication open. His illness got worse and eventually turned into typhoid fever. Ball recalls that he died not long after the storm on February 28, 1915. According to Charles Hyam, who wrote The Real Life of Lucille Ball, the whole family had to go into quarantine when Ball's father was diagnosed with the disease. He wrote, "This rejection and forced isolation had a deep effect on Lucille, contributing to her paranoid feelings of rejection later in life and perhaps inspiring a desire to make people accept and love her, a desire that consumes all entertainers." After her father's untimely passing, Lucille Ball's mother eventually remarried, settling down with a man named Ed Peterson. The family, along with Lucille's grandparents, moved into a 3-bedroom house in Celeb, New York. Ball writes that her grandparents were short on money, but they helped the family feel whole. Unfortunately, tragedy would soon strike yet again. On the future comedian's 16th birthday, she recalls her grandfather Fred coming home with a mysterious object wrapped in brown paper that turned out to be a .22 caliber rifle. Her brother Freddie couldn't wait to try it out. Their stepfather placed tin cans as targets in their backyard, inviting their neighbors Cleo, Johanna, and Warner over to play as well. As Johanna picked up the gun, Warner's mother called him home, frightening the girl and causing her to accidentally shoot Warner instead. He was rushed to the hospital, where it was discovered that the bullet had struck Warner in the spine, severing the cord. While Ed offered to pay the medical bills, Warner's family filed a lawsuit and won. Ball wrote, "They took our house, the furnishings that Dee Dee had bought so laboriously on time week after week, the insurance, everything. My grandfather never worked again. The heart went out of him. It ruined Celeb for us. It destroyed our life together there." There's no denying that Lucille Ball is a comedy icon. She won numerous accolades, including Golden Globes, the Cecil B. DeMille Award, and the Lifetime Achievement Award in Comedy at the American Comedy Awards. It's clear that Ball made her mark on television for countless generations to come. Oddly enough, however, the actress almost gave up early on in her career. According to the Los Angeles Times, when Ball was still a teenager pushing for her big break on Broadway, her drama teacher told her to give up. Leaving school shortly after, Ball simply kept gunning for an opportunity, enrolling in the John Murray Anderson Dramatic School in New York. While she was in a few very small roles on Broadway, her career really started when she turned to modeling. With her face appearing on billboards and magazines and in store ads, she became an incredibly recognizable figure. Finally, in 1933, she turned her sights to Hollywood. Her teacher's advice seemed to stick with Ball for years to come. She once told Rolling Stone in a 1983 interview, "I am not funny. My writers were funny. My directors were funny. The situations were funny. What I am is brave."
You think they could make a glamour girl out of me? Sure. Says right here, we work miracles.
Ball met Desi Arnaz on a movie set in 1940, and she later told the Los Angeles Times that she felt it was true love from the very beginning. They eloped after just 6 months, but the cracks started showing quickly. Ball was left mentally exhausted due to Arnaz's infidelity and drinking, so much that it may have contributed to 2 miscarriages that she suffered. In 1944, after being married for 4 years, the pair separated, albeit briefly. The pair soon reunited both professionally and romantically, and they approached CBS with an idea based on some of the work they'd done together. Premiering on CBS in October of 1951, I Love Lucy was a smash hit, mainly due to the adorable on-screen couple that was Lucy McGillicuddy Ricardo, played by Ball, and Ricky Ricardo, played by Arnaz. The show's success helped keep the couple together, but Arnaz's old habits reappeared, and even other cast members noticed. Keith Thibodeau, who played Little Ricky, told People magazine, "I can see why their marriage didn't make it. Desi was a really great guy when he wasn't drinking, but as kids, we'd definitely stay away from him when he was drunk." Ball would frequently call her friends for help and advice in the middle of the night if Desi got too heavy into his drinking, and the couple eventually divorced in 1960. Speaking with the Los Angeles Times, Ball later said of Desi, "He was like Jekyll and Hyde. It was always the same, booze and broads." Despite their frequent problems, the couple still did have some happiness. Obviously, their show was very successful, and the two also had a son and a daughter together.
It'll help our vibrations.
Lucy!
What?
Don't you like the way I vibrate?
Ball would later call her children her proudest achievement. Ball's marriage to Arnaz dramatically changed her personality. She was once carefree and full of spirit, but people started to notice that she seemed paranoid and suspicious of everyone. Speaking with People magazine, the actress's longtime friend Lillian Briggs Winograd said, "She had a lousy situation with Desi's carousing and gambling for 18 years. She wanted out of Hollywood because everyone was always saying, 'Poor Lucy.' Ball was most likely fed up with the pity, too, and the entire situation rubbed off on those around her." Actor Richard Burton, who appeared on Here's Lucy, wrote in his autobiography, "She's a monster of staggering charmlessness. She is a tired old woman and lives entirely on that weekly show. I loathe her today, but now I also pity her." Keith Thibodeau echoed a similar sentiment, telling people that Ball's temper was legendary and people knew to avoid her when she was having a rough day. In the end, after her divorce from Arnaz, it seemed like Ball finally found some clarity. She actually helped other actresses with their relationships, offering advice from her own experiences. When I Love Lucy was on the air, the sitcom completely captivated the country. The Los Angeles Times wrote, "The show was so popular that it literally stopped the nation every Monday night from 9 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Many stores would even shut down before the show started, knowing that they wouldn't have any customers while it was airing." I Love Lucy finally came to an end in 1957. Lucille Ball later decided to resurrect her familiar character in 1968's sequel show Here's Lucy, starring her two kids, in part to kickstart their own careers. Once that was accomplished, she decided it was time to retire Lucy in 1974 and try her hand at Hollywood again. That same year, Ball filmed her final feature film, Mame, an adaptation of a Broadway musical. Reviewers ripped her to shreds. Jerry Herman, who composed the Broadway hit, even told publications how disappointed he was with Ball's portrayal of the lead role. She mostly laid low after the failure of Mame, but she decided to return to TV with Life with Lucy in 1986. It, too, was a flop. However, with Ball at age 75 and her heyday long gone, the character didn't strike the right chord with audiences. Her character was stuck the way she always was, where they could have made her much more interesting. Life with Lucy only lasted 13 episodes. Ball and Arnaz's second child, Desi Jr., unfortunately took after his father when it came to his bad boy reputation. He claims that he thought he fell in love at the age of 13, and he was a father by 15. However, taking after his father when it came to womanizing wasn't the only problem that Desi Jr. had. Lucille Ball seemed to have as many issues with her son as she had with her husband. Desi Jr. knew his father had issues with addiction, and he followed the same dark path with drugs. Ultimately, he finally checked himself into rehab. Looking back on this dark period in his life, Desi Jr. thinks he succeeded in rehab due to his mother and father. Speaking with Closer Weekly, he said, "Both my mother and my father were invited to come with me, and they did. They were very supportive, and I think they were helped tremendously by what happened to me." Despite a tumultuous marriage, Ball and Arnaz maintained a connection even after their divorce finalized in 1960. The pair seemed to flourish after parting ways, even with one another. Their daughter later said that getting divorced was the best thing that ever happened to both of them, and that the duo actually became more friendly towards each other after they split up. Ball later married Gary Morton, and Arnaz married Edith Mack Hirsch, but it was evident to everyone that these two exes genuinely still cherished one another. According to Desi Liu, the story of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, Desi's last words to his former wife before he died in 1986 were, "I love you too, honey. Good luck with your show." Lucille Ball died just a few years later in 1989. When she did, Paula Stewart, a friend of Ball's second husband Gary Morton, recalls Morton telling her that he assumed Lucille was happy now since she was with Desi again. In April of 1989, Lucille Ball suffered a heart attack at the age of 77 and went through over 7 hours of surgery to help her recover. The doctors who treated her were worried about the severity of the heart attack and Ball's age, but were optimistic she would recover. Entertainers, comedians, and fans all expressed their sentiment that Ball would pull through. Tragically, even with well-wishers calling, praying, and sending letters, the icon of comedy did not recover from her operation. On Wednesday, April 26, 1989, a week after she checked into the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Lucille Ball died of a ruptured abdominal aorta. The hospital released a statement expressing their sorrow and indicating that they had no way to prevent Ball's passing. Speaking with People magazine after her passing, Ball's friend Michael Stern said, Her private nurse said that she went to bed that Tuesday night feeling good, knowing that the world loved her. God gave her that extra time so she would know that she was still loved. I think she needed that. Considering all the tragedy, uncertainty, and difficulties that Lucille Ball endured over her life, it's certain that the TV icon would be radiating to know that to this day, the world still loves Lucy too.
Lucille Ball's name surely rings a bell with anyone who loves classic comedy. Her hilarious sitcom, I Love Lucy, was revolutionary for its time, and our parents and grandparents passed their love for the show down to many of us. Her ex-husband, Desi Arnaz, was just as famous during his prime. So it's no wonder that when they had a son, Desi Arnaz Jr. instantly became one of the most famous people in America. In fact, he first appeared on TV before he was even born, while he was still in Lucy's womb. But even though he went on to become an actor and musician himself, appearing in over 30 films and television shows, his career was always overshadowed by the fact that he was his parents' child. And that took a toll, as Arnaz Jr. grew up in the media spotlight. Denied a normal life, he instead leaned into the fame. In 1978, at the age of just 25, he told People magazine, quote, "Years ago, I was a playboy." According to Dino Martin, Arnaz Jr.'s beloved friend and son of Dean Martin, Arnaz Jr. was, quote, "in love 3 times a week." Martin also revealed that when the two were in a band together, Arnaz Jr. played the field and there was, quote, "no shortage of groupies." As a result, Arnaz Jr. became a father himself when he was just 15 to a daughter named Julie. Her mother, Susan Howe, was a model at the time, but the fling was brief. Arnaz Jr. and his daughter didn't have a relationship until she was 25 years old, and even then it was strained. Arnaz Jr.'s womanizing was a quality he seemed to have inherited. Back in the day, Desi Arnaz Sr. had a reputation for being quite the womanizer himself. But Arnaz Jr.'s womanizing got even more attention partly due to the fact that he was in the spotlight from a young age, a symptom of having 2 famous parents, and partly due to the fame of the women he dated, including big stars like Patty Duke, Liza Minnelli, Kim Darby, Tina Sinatra, and more. But Arnaz Jr. didn't just struggle with fame and women. Like many child stars, he also struggled with drugs. Arnaz Jr. attributes his drug use to self-medicating. The actor grew up in a world where the media constantly told him who he was, and Arnaz Jr. says he didn't know who he was. Besides womanizing, Arnaz Jr. also seemed to inherit his substance abuse issues from his father. Keith Thibodeau, the actor who eventually played Little Ricky on I Love Lucy, told People magazine in 1989 that Desi Sr. wasn't always much fun to be around. Desi was really a great guy when he wasn't drinking. But as kids, we'd definitely stay away from him when he was drunk. Thibodeau said that Arnaz Sr. frequently had violent, drunken outbursts, including a time he beat up Arnaz Jr.'s tutor, and another time he fired a gun off into the air because someone was hanging out on a beach that he owned. All of which just added to the difficulties Arnaz Jr. faced growing up. So, by his own admission, he began using drugs as a way to destroy himself, because he was tired of being Desi Arnaz Jr. Still, despite their issues, both of Arnaz Jr.'s parents were extremely supportive of their son. And though they were divorced, they came together one more time on his behalf. When Arnaz Jr. went into rehab, both of his parents actually went with him to make sure he got the support he needed. For Arnaz Jr., who was able to get clean with their help, it finally was a true Hollywood ending.
Where did TV legend Lucille Ball's money go after she died? And how did her personal letters wind up in the hands of a pro golfer? Let's find out. Although she is perhaps best known today for her groundbreaking sitcom series I Love Lucy, there's plenty more to say about comedy icon Lucille Ball. Thanks to Desi Productions, she was also the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio. Alongside her husband Desi Arnaz, she broke ground by depicting one of the first interracial couples on television. Ball and Arnaz first met on a film set back in 1940 and eloped soon after. Years later, when CBS approached her about developing her own show, she wouldn't do it unless Arnaz played her on-screen husband. The network reluctantly agreed, and a sitcom legend was born. However, the union between Ball and Arnaz did not last, though I Love Lucy shows otherwise. The pair's relationship was filled with infidelity and drinking on his part. when their TV relationship had run its course. They divorced in 1960, putting an end to 20 tumultuous years of marriage. Ball cited extreme cruelty and mental suffering as the cause, but despite their divorce and subsequent new partners, Ball and Arnaz remained close. She went on to marry comedian Gary Morton in 1961, and they stayed together until her death in 1989. After struggling with fertility issues in the 1940s, Ball and Arnaz eventually had 2 children together. She gave birth to their daughter Lucy in 1951 and their son Desi Jr. in 1953. In fact, her pregnancy with her son was even written into I Love Lucy. According to Time magazine, the network was initially against the idea. However, by excluding the word pregnancy from the storyline, Ball and Arnaz were eventually allowed to incorporate it into the script.
I heard you sing a number called We're Having a Baby, My Baby and Me. If you will sing it for us now, it will be my way of breaking the news to him.
Her son was born on the same day that the birth episode of I Love Lucy aired on CBS. But what was the iconic redhead like as a mother? In an interview with KCRW in 2021, Lucy Arnaz said that her mom was always struggling to find ways to relate to her own kids. And of course, by the time she had children, Ball was already in her 40s. Not to mention, she was a successful and extremely busy entertainment personality. Lucy Arnaz also noted in her conversation with KCRW that her mother went so far as to ask other celebrities, including Debbie Reynolds, for parenting advice. She believes that Ball didn't know how to be a parent since her own father had died when she was 4, and her mother, who worked to support the family, was gone most of the day. She described her mother as, quote, flying blind when it came to parenting. In another interview with WTOP, Lucy Arnaz stressed that while both she and her brother had a luxurious childhood, what they really wanted was more time with their working parents. Despite this, she emphasized that her folks truly loved each other and were creative geniuses. Lucille Ball was 77 when she died of a ruptured aorta on April 27, 1989, leaving behind an estate worth an estimated $40 million. The inheritance was split among her 2 children, Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr., and her second husband, Gary Morton. 7 years after Ball's death, Morton went on to marry a professional golfer named Susie McAllister. That marriage, however, was short-lived, as he died 3 years later. With Morton gone, his portion of Ball's inheritance went to McAllister. In 2010, more than a decade after Morton's death, Heritage Auctions announced that McAllister was parting ways with Ball's estate items because she was remodeling her home. Some of those items included jewelry, awards, love letters, art, and even a Rolls-Royce. This, of course, did not sit well with Ball's children, especially Lucy Arnaz, who threatened legal action to stop the auction. McAllister responded by filing a suit. According to Danielle and Andy Mayoras, the judge ruled he would stop the sale only if Arnaz could post a $250,000 bond. She did not have the money, however. Heritage Auctions later agreed to return Ball's awards to Arnaz, who planned to donate them to a museum. McAllister went on to sell the rest of the items, including the love letters and the car. They reportedly brought in over $230,000.
I Love Lucy was an instant hit all over the United States when it premiered in 1951, but behind the scenes, all was not as happy as it appeared on screen. Here's what even the show's biggest fans didn't know. Before Lucille Ball became known to the world as Lucy Ricardo, she worked as a B-film actress in the 1940s, starring in films for MGM. When her big break didn't come on the big screen, Ball decided to make a more direct play for the public's attention with a radio show. Ball quit film to star in the radio series My Favorite Husband for CBS Studios in 1948. My Favorite Husband followed the story of Liz Cugat and her husband George, a man who was constantly frustrated with his eccentric wife. Sound familiar? By the second season, with television on the rise, CBS brought Ball an offer to convert the show into a visual format. Husband ended after nearly 4 years to be adapted into the beloved television sitcom I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball met Desi Arnaz in Hollywood on the film set of Too Many Girls in 1940. Before the end of the year, they eloped to Connecticut to marry. Ball's career in film started to take off with an MGM contract, while Arnaz's petered out. Though his wife was earning money, Arnaz was going a little stir-crazy at home. So Arnaz, who had a successful career as an orchestra leader before doing movies, returned to his first love and began touring the country with his band. By 1944, Ball had filed for a divorce. According to biography, she was tired of his, quote, infidelities and heavy drinking. He was always out of town or out all night. Before the divorce was final, the couple made an arrangement to make it work. To do that, Ball believed she needed to find a way to keep Arnaz at home. When CBS offered her the opportunity to turn My Dear Husband into a series, she agreed to do it as long as it starred her husband. When Lucille Ball demanded Desi Arnaz be the lead in the televised version of My Dear Husband, CBS did not like the idea. Ball biographer Kathleen Brady told PBS that the studio was resistant because they didn't believe audiences would buy the American Ball's marriage to a Cuban immigrant.
No one wanted him to play my husband because he was Cuban, and they wanted a real American couple.
In order to prove America would love it, Ball and Arnaz took their act on the road. They created a well-reviewed slapstick routine they do on tour with Arnaz's band. By the end of 1950, CBS had given in and greenlit the couple to star in My Favorite Husband, which became I Love Lucy and starred America's favorite sweethearts, Lucy and Ricky Ricardo. Now that Lucille Ball had her first demand met, having her real-life husband Desi Arnaz star in I Love Lucy, it was time for her second, that the show be filmed in Los Angeles. The problem was, no show at that time had ever been shot in Los Angeles. It was a technical impossibility. Shows were broadcast from New York, then recorded on kinescopes. A kinescope was a camera that recorded live TV, so the recording could be sent to other markets throughout the country. The quality was terrible. According to the Directors Guild of America, Philip Morris, the show's sponsor, hated the idea of making I Love Lucy in Los Angeles. The sponsor feared that the kinescope process would mean the East Coast market would end up watching a terrible version of the show they were paying for. So Arnaz and Ball decided to shoot on film. That way, the show would always be preserved on a high-quality format. It's the reason you can still watch reruns of I Love Lucy to this day. But film was expensive, so more innovation was needed. To streamline the film production process, the show developed the multi-camera format of sitcom production. The show had adjoined sets, putting all the action in one place with a studio audience and shot continuously as if it were a play. They used 3 cameras simultaneously to record their wide, medium, and close-up shots. The technique was so fast and efficient that it's still used by sitcoms today. Even with the technical innovations created to shoot I Love Lucy as efficiently as possible, the show was still going over CBS's proposed budget. So Ball and Arnaz formed Desi Lou Productions and used $5,000 of their own money to produce the show's pilot, on the condition that they would fully own the final product. This was a genius move. Ball and Arnaz owned the show, meaning that if it was successful, they would make a lot more money than their weekly salary as actors. It also meant they would get any residuals or profits made off the show's reruns. I Love Lucy became a hit show, so Arnaz and Ball began to grow Desi Lou into a TV empire. After producing hits like The Untouchables and The Ann Sothern Show, Desi Lou sold their syndication rights back to CBS for $5 million. They would no longer receive money off of reruns, but they had enough money to buy RKO Studios in 1957. The massive studio lot soon became home to other hits like The Andy Griffith Show and The Dick Van Dyke Show, turning Desi Lou into an independent production powerhouse. During the second season of I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball became pregnant with the couple's second child, Desi Arnaz Jr. Desi Arnaz Sr. wanted to work this into the storyline of the show, but sponsor Philip Morris wasn't into the idea. Eventually, CBS and Philip Morris conceded. By that time, I Love Lucy was the #1 rated show on television, and Ball and Arnaz were never the type to back down. They were allowed to show Ball being pregnant and talk about her pregnancy on the condition that they were never allowed to use the word pregnant. This censorship actually assisted in making the episodes fun. Lucy tries to tell Ricky she's in the family way, but is continually blocked and distracted until finally she interrupts Ricky during a performance with his band. Ricky then begins singing We're Having a Baby. The storyline was a massive hit and stretched for 7 episodes leading up to the season 2 finale. The Ricardos' relationship was not the only one drawing viewers into the show. The partnership between characters Ethel Mertz and Lucy Ricardo was just as fraught with humor and conflict and became a key part of I Love Lucy's legacy. In an interview with PBS, Lucille Ball biographer Kathleen Brady agreed that the friendship between Ethel and Lucy was the show's, quote, most enduring influence. Their relationship is what inspired a long legacy of TV shows where female friendship is one of, if not the most important theme. Shows like Laverne and Shirley, Sex and the City, and Broad City. In the well-known and loved episode Lucy Does a TV Commercial, Lucy Ricardo wants to prove to her husband Ricky Ricardo that she is a good actress, but he won't give her a chance. So to retaliate, she sneaks onto a commercial set, dismisses the woman who is hired, and takes over her job. Of course, it's immediately funny when she has to pronounce the name of the product, Vitamita Vegemin, which would be hard to say even if you came prepared. As she pitches the health tonic to viewers, she takes sips of it, not realizing one of the main ingredients is grain alcohol. The laughs grow exponentially as she gets more and more drunk, but remains determined to show Ricky she's good at commercials.
The answer to all your problems is in this little old bottle.
According to Stephen Camphor's Lucille Ball biography, Ball of Fire, during the episode, even Desi Arnaz himself had to bite the inside of his lip to hold back laughter. Lucille Ball's talent was undeniable, and her husband was more than a little jealous. While the official title of the episode is Job Switching, many folks may remember another iconic I Love Lucy installment as the Candy episode, the one where Lucy Ricardo and Ethel Mertz get jobs working at a candy factory. In an effort to keep up with a conveyor belt carrying chocolates, Lucy begins stuffing them in her mouth. According to the book Ball of Fire, Desi Arnaz found a real-life candy dipper at a local farmer's market to play the guest star in the episode. The woman, Amanda Milligan, plays another factory employee who works alongside Lucy and Ethel. Arnaz's thought was that the experienced candy maker would make an ideal deadpan expression to contrast with Lucy's silliness. When it was time to film the episode, Ball got nervous. According to Ball of Fire, she recalled, "We explained the scene to her a couple of times and she thought we were all crazy. She never cracked a smile once. We began to think, is this funny or isn't it?" In the scene, Milligan is supposed to hit Lucille Ball, but in rehearsal she'd merely tap her. When they finally shot the scene, Ball recalled, "Well, it came time for me to hit her, which I did, and then for her to hit me, which she did. Bam! She gave me such a shot I thought she had broken my nose." The grape stomping episode is actually called Lucy's Italian Movie. In it, an Italian director wants Lucy to play the role of an American tourist, but she thinks she's supposed to be a grape stomper. Grape stomping was an outdated and unnecessary practice since vineyards now had machines to squish their grapes, but it made for good comedy. According to Ball of Fire, Arnaz managed to find one of the last remaining real grape stompers. He hired her, a woman named Teresa Torelli, to play Lucy's counterpart. Once again, using another non-actor proved to be an interesting experience on set. Teresa didn't speak English and needed a translator to tell her what to do. As Lucille Ball recalled in Ball of Fire, "The time came for us to get in the vat, which was full of real grapes. We started stomping grapes, and I made a dance out of it, and then I slipped. She accidentally hit Teresa, who in turn hit her back." Ball recalled, "She just held me down, hitting me. I thought she was trying to kill me. I had grapes up my nose, up my ears. She was choking me." No one knew Ball was struggling, as they thought it was all part of the show and that Ball would do anything for a laugh. Fred and Ethel Mertz were unabashedly angry and displeased with each other on screen, and that's why audiences loved them. But the actors, Vivian, Vance, and William Frawley, hated each other in real life, too.
He's no dream, he's a nightmare.
Vance came from Broadway and thought she was better than Frawley, who came from Broadway as well, but spent the majority of his career as a character actor starring in over 100 films. According to the other side of Ethel Mertz, the life story of Vivian Vance, Vance said, "How can anyone believe that I'd be married to that old coot?" What Frawley said in response is not safe for primetime television. Frawley had a bad reputation for drinking and being unprofessional, but he was a great actor, so they kept him around. Etta Hopper, the scariest gossip columnist in Hollywood, was friends with Lucille Ball and was able to keep any unfavorable press about the I Love Lucy cast out of print. Instead of gossip about the feud between the co-stars, the studio wrote press releases that said things like a, quote, four-way admiration society existed between the stars. And they'd even pepper in quotes from Vance about how much she loved Frawley. No one knew for years about the constant bickering behind the scenes. Coming off a successful first season of I Love Lucy in the spring of 1952, Lucille Ball discovered she was being investigated by the House Committee of Un-American Activities. In 1936, Ball had registered as a communist, and that eventually put her on the committee's radar as it worked to eliminate, quote, radical influence from Hollywood via an infamous blacklist. Ball was summoned to testify before Congress. According to the New York Times, Ball explained that she had done it to humor her eccentric socialist grandfather. Ball's mother had also registered as a communist for the same reason, and that she hadn't actually voted in the election. The committee accepted this story and let Lucille Ball go. As the New York Times later wrote, the charges prompted Desi Arnaz to quip, "The only thing red about this girl is her hair, and even that we're not so sure about." I Love Lucy continued airing and gaining in popularity, but the investigation was never quite over. According to the Washington Post, the committee forgave her, but J. Edgar Hoover never forgot. The FBI director continued to collect evidence about Ball. The FBI continued to keep files on Ball and her husband well into the 1950s, because Hoover was never going to let an opportunity to gather dirt on a potential enemy pass him by.
Merry Christmas, everybody!
In 1989, CBS unearthed an old I Love Lucy Christmas special and aired it. The ratings were terrific, prompting a search for other missing episodes that eventually struck gold. In 1951, Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball shot their own pilot for I Love Lucy at a studio in New York, but it never aired. It was recorded on a kinescope, though, and a copy wound up in an unexpected place. According to a 1990 article in the Washington Post, Desi Arnaz had given a copy of the episode to Pepito, a clown who appeared in the pilot. Years later, Pepito's widow discovered it and passed it on to B. Donald Grant, former head of CBS Entertainment. Through Grant, the original pilot finally found its way to television. CBS aired the special on April 30th, 1990 under the title of I Love Lucy, the very first show. The special was hosted by Lucy Arnaz, Ball and Arnaz's first child, with whom Ball was pregnant when the original pilot was filmed. According to the Associated Press, an estimated 40 million viewers tuned in to watch, making the very first show another ratings hit even decades after I Love Lucy ended. The first pilot never aired because the show was drastically changed after landing Philip Morris as a sponsor. The initial pilot had Arnaz's agent as a main character, which was later cut because, according to Ball biographer Stephen Camper, the plot detracted from the central relationship between Lucy and Desi. So they made Lucy and Desi Ricardo more working class and relatable, and added Fred and Ethel Mertz as their neighbors to make the version of I Love Lucy that we know and love today. In many ways, I Love Lucy was an example of art imitating life. In real life, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were married. Arnaz was a band leader, and they had a baby the same day Lucy and Ricky Ricardo had a baby. But behind the scenes, the marriage between Ball and Arnaz was tumultuous. According to Ball Fire, with all of the efforts to create a nuclear family, Lucy spent much of the week alone with the baby, while Desi went to his 38-foot power cruiser Desi Lou and joined the roistering buddies who had been banished from the ranch. Jerry Hausner, who played Ricky's agent in the series, talked about Arnaz to the Washington Post, saying, "He screamed at me and called me names in front of the audience. He was drunk a lot of the time. I went to the producer and said, 'Write me out of this thing.'" Ball had hoped the show would bring their family together, but Arnaz continued to party and engage in affairs. Eventually, the tabloids caught on, and in 1955, a magazine called Confidential ran a story about Arnaz's philandering, in which he was quoted telling a friend that Lucy shouldn't be upset by his affairs because he only dated sex workers and not, quote, other broads. The image of the Ricardos as a great American love story persisted on I Love Lucy, but the relationship between Ball and Arnaz was never a completely happy one. In 1960, when the stress of the show and their marriage had been enough, Lucille Ball filed for a divorce from Desi Arnaz. Arnaz and Ball shared their last kiss on the last episode of the Lucy-Desi Comedy Hour. Ball went on to run Desi Lou, helping produce shows like The Untouchables and Star Trek. While Ball has received a lot of fanfare for being a girl boss, her biggest dream was to be a housewife.
I was delighted to be pregnant. Nothing else mattered.
According to PBS, Ball was fond of dusting her office even while doing interviews to promote Desi Lou in an effort to reinforce a sense of domestic life. It seemed throughout all her success, all she ever wanted was Arnaz and for the family to be together. According to the I Love Lucy book, in the years before the show began, when Ball looked back on her film career, she was quoted as saying, "Of all the 30 or 40 films I had made up to that time, I could only find 3 or 4 scenes in those pictures that I cared anything about. I discovered they were domestic scenes where I portrayed a housewife." It turns out that what Lucille Ball really wanted was to be Lucy Ricardo forever.
What product that Lucille Ball hawked throughout her life likely contributed to her death? Her autopsy tells the tale. Lucille Ball made her mark in Hollywood as an accomplished comedian, finding international fame in the groundbreaking TV series I Love Lucy. The show kicked off in 1951 and catapulted Ball and her husband, Desi Arnaz, into the living rooms of millions of Americans every Monday night for the next 6 years, until the show ended in 1957. It was the first program aired by Desi Lou Productions Incorporated, a studio founded and co-owned by Arnaz and Ball. Desi Lou Productions went on to produce many other classic series, including Star Trek and Mission Impossible. The company's success made Ball one of the few female studio executives of her time, a savvy businesswoman in a male-dominated field. It was a truly extraordinary achievement for a woman in 1950s America. Ball was, of course, married to her business partner and co-star Arnaz from 1940 until 1960. Following their divorce, Ball wed comedian Gary Morton in 1961, and they remained married until her death. The Queen of Comedy passed away on April 26, 1989 at the age of 77, 8 days after undergoing emergency heart surgery. The cause of death at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles was determined to be a ruptured abdominal aorta in a different location from her surgery. But questions remain about what caused so much damage to such a critical blood vessel. For several years before her death, Ball was using amyl nitrite, also a popular street drug known at the time as poppers, according to People. During an interview on Autopsy on the Reels channel, forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter explained that amyl nitrite was originally used as a prescription drug to treat chest pain. Having reviewed Ball's autopsy report, Hunter said, as early as 1984, 4 years before her death, Lucille Ball was using this inhalant to ease pains in her chest and heart.
And that could be a warning sign of already established cardiovascular disease.
Ball's autopsy also revealed that a condition called cystic medial necrosis, a breakdown of muscle, collagen, and elastin in the large blood vessels, reportedly contributed to the star's death. According to the New York Post, Ball smoked for much of her life too. and even booked a job as the Chesterfield cigarette girl in 1933. She also advertised cigarettes on I Love Lucy. The habit may have also been a contributing factor in her death.
I stopped smoking for 6 or 7 weeks and put on 9 pounds again.
Before making it big with I Love Lucy, Ball spent time working at a drugstore on Broadway as a waitress and soda jerk, while auditioning for shows without much success, per the New York Times. Eventually, she found work modeling hats and posing for advertisements, and it wasn't long before Tinseltown came calling. To start with, Ball secured small, often uncredited parts in films. She frequently appeared in more dramatic fare, though she also performed in some comedies, even working alongside the Three Stooges in 1934's Three Little Pigskins. In the 1940s, Ball dyed her hair red, something she had been advised to do by MGM to rejuvenate her career. Her red locks went on to become one of her calling cards, and after a spell on radio, she landed her signature TV series, I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy ended its run in 1957, but Desi Productions continued to be extremely active for the next few years. Following their 1960 divorce, Ball bought out her ex-husband's share of the studio, according to biography. Once she was completely in control of Desi, she earned her place in history as the first woman to run a major studio, selling it in 1967 for $17 million. The icon didn't rest on her laurels after the success of I Love Lucy and Desi Productions either. Instead, she continued working, starring in the sitcoms The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy. In the 1980s, Ball appeared in a dramatic role in the TV movie Stone Pillow, and in 1986, she debuted her fourth sitcom, Life with Lucy. While she was paid handsomely to do the show, it was easily the biggest failure of all her sitcoms, lasting only 8 episodes. Regardless, Ball's legacy as one of the greatest comedy actors of all time lives on.
I Love Lucy is one of the most enduring and beloved TV shows of all time. But the fame that Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz, and their co-stars enjoyed came at a cost. Keep watching to discover some tragic details about the I Love Lucy cast. By 1940, Lucille Ball was a movie star. That year, she starred in Too Many Girls, which is where she met Desi Arnaz. His role in that film was small, but their love for each other was big. The couple eloped shortly after they met, but Arnaz was drafted in the Army soon after. Despite Ball's strong-willed reputation, she often gave in to her husband. As actress Ruta Lee told Closer Weekly in 2017, if he wanted something, she would get it for him. If they were seated and he needed more room, she would slide over. I found it surprising because she was such a strong, independent lady. It's worth noting that Arnaz was already engaged to someone else when he met Ball, and there were other women in the picture as well. Because of his infidelity, in 1944, Ball filed for divorce for the first of multiple times. The couple eventually reconciled, though Arnaz continued cheating. When I Love Lucy was being developed, Ball wisely insisted that Arnaz be cast as her husband in order to keep him close. She later told People magazine, "TV started for me just as a means of keeping my husband Desi off the road. He'd been on tour with his band since he got out of the Army, and we were in our 11th year of marriage and wanted to have children." There was more to Ball's determination to have her husband on I Love Lucy than met the eye. As it turns out, the couple had been trying to have children for quite some time. They had endured a few miscarriages during their attempts, including ones in 1942 and 1949. A third happened in 1950 while I Love Lucy was in the works. Nevertheless, work on the show continued as the couple grieved. Ball later explained to the Saturday Evening Post that she was indeed working on I Love Lucy and sorting out details with her talent agency when she lost her baby. As she put it, "To get my mind off my loss, I said to Desi and the agency, we'll try out our proposed TV act in vaudeville. We did, and the public accepted our Cuban-American marriage in spite of the doubts of the talent agency people." In July 1951, just a few months before I Love Lucy's premiere, Ball finally gave birth to a daughter named Lucy. 2 years later, Lucy was joined by her brother, Desi Jr.
I was delighted to be pregnant. Nothing else mattered.
In 1951, I Love Lucy was about to become a sensation, and the star of the show wanted her Cuban-born husband to co-star alongside her. But at that time, there were 29 states in the country that had laws against interracial marriage. Would America accept a white woman married to a Cuban man? Neither CBS nor I Love Lucy's sponsor, Philip Morris Cigarettes, thought so. Instead, they wanted to hire Richard Denning, who was on Ball's popular radio show, My Favorite Husband, which evolved into I Love Lucy. But Ball begged to differ. She boldly told the network that if they wouldn't have Arnaz, they couldn't have her either. To prove her point, she enlisted her husband and writer-producer Jess Oppenheimer to create a stage version of the show. Performed in front of a live audience at a theater, the stage show was a hit, so CBS had no choice but to give in, and the result was truly something special. The ratings were massive, as typically more than 50% of all Americans watching TV at any given time were tuning in to watch the crazy redhead and her exasperated husband. Lucille Ball had been a registered voter since at least 1936. At the insistence of her grandfather, she signed an affidavit of registration in favor of the Communist Party. Back then, blue-collar workers reeling from poverty caused by the Great Depression were looking for hope. Predictions that economic struggles would be over in weeks proved to be unfounded, as the Depression dragged on for months and then years. Until Franklin Roosevelt introduced his New Deal in 1935, the poorest people in the country began leaning toward communism as a way to gain some sort of relief from their troubles. But the New Deal didn't happen overnight, and for Lucille Ball, whose father died when she was young, her grandfather, Fred Hunt, provided the support she needed in her show business career. Ball didn't just register as a communist, she also hosted classes for others in her California home. So when a right-wing publication attacked 151 workers in the entertainment industry, she was one of them. To clear her reputation, she twice testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1953. She was popular enough that fans of I Love Lucy, including FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, stood by her. The chemistry between William Frawley and Vivian Vance, who played Fred and Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy, was unmistakable, at least on the screen. Frawley was born in 1887 and acted in vaudeville before signing with Paramount Pictures for movie parts, but he had a reputation for being hard to work with. He was also an alcoholic, and he was once fired for punching one of his fellow actors. His career was on the skids when he was hired for I Love Lucy. In return for refraining from bad behavior, his contract allowed him to attend the World Series anytime the Yankees played. It seemed like Frawley was content enough, but then he met Vance. She had troubles of her own. She initially didn't get along with Lucille Ball, and she also was aghast to be playing the wife of a man 22 years her senior. Frawley overheard Vance telling Ball and Arnaz that the audience wouldn't believe she was married to such an old man. The relationship was doomed. When I Love Lucy went off the air, CBS proposed a spin-off called Fred and Ethel, but both actors refused. When Frawley died in 1966, Vance heard about it while at a restaurant and reportedly called out, "Champagne for everyone." I Love Lucy was so popular while it was on the air that Life magazine called Ball and Arnaz TV's first family in a 1953 issue. But by 1957, the cast members were sick of the weekly grind. The last episode aired on May 6 of that year, with the Ricardos ending up in Connecticut in the final season. Everyone was then looking forward to the Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz show, which would run from 1957 to 1960 in I Love Lucy's place. But the Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz show was a little different. It ran as a series of hour-long specials that aired at various times. All four of the main actors from I Love Lucy also starred in the new show, as the Mertzes relocated to Connecticut as well. But the new show would only last 3 years. By the end of it, Ball had finally become fed up with Arnaz's infidelity and drinking. The day after production on the last show wrapped, she filed for divorce. Her daughter, Lucy, later told Closer Weekly, "They were fighting all the time when we were growing up. There was a lot of anger and screaming." Lucille Ball filed for her divorce from Desi Arnaz in 1960, but trouble had been brewing in their marriage for a while by then. The two were already practically living separate lives when I Love Lucy began production. While Arnaz fully acknowledged that Ball was the star of the show, that didn't stop him from being a philanderer and drinking too much. Ball knew all about her husband's infidelity. One time, she took a magazine article describing his exploits and read it in her dressing room. When she came out, she threw the magazine at him and said, "Oh hell, I could tell them worse than that." The Ball-Arnaz marriage was all about professionalism. Privately, the couple kept separate bedrooms, and although they talked of divorce several times, they never followed through because of their shows. In an interview with People magazine, Ball was asked what her darkest moment was, and she said, "When I got a divorce." and disappointed millions of people by doing so. But that time in Ball's life wasn't all bad. She bought out Desi Productions in 1962, making her the first woman in history to run a TV studio. Although Ball and Arnaz remained friends and even continued to work together, they would never share the spotlight with each other again. It wasn't easy to play Ethel Mertz on TV's most popular show. For one thing, Lucille Ball had hesitations about even hiring actress Vivian Vance in the first place, as she was worried that she would overshadow her own attractiveness. So producers scurried to dress Ethel in frumpier clothing, and Vance's contract required her to always weigh more than Ball. If Lucy gained weight, Ethel was directed to gain weight as well. Eventually, though, both actresses got over their misgivings. They became best friends, often laughing over the old days on various talk shows. This friendship continued long after I Love Lucy and the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour went off the air. Vance was a regular on The Lucy Show, which ran on CBS from 1962 to 1968. Her final TV appearance was in the 1977 CBS special, Lucy Calls the President. She suffered a stroke later that year and died from bone cancer in 1979. When People magazine asked Ball in 1980 whether she wanted to do another series, she responded, "I wouldn't think of it. Not since my Vivian's gone. We enjoyed it so much, we didn't want to go home at night."
Oh, the scrapes Lucy got me into.
The cast of I Love Lucy was actually required to smoke on air. The show's sponsor was Philip Morris Cigarettes, and their product was featured in most episodes as well as on the commercial breaks. If nobody was smoking, someone would inevitably say, "Let's all have a cigarette," as it was written into the script. Packs of Philip Morris were nearly always in view of the camera, and cigarettes were carefully placed to make sure they resembled something like dessert. With that in mind, it shouldn't be too surprising that Desi Arnaz was eventually diagnosed with lung cancer, especially considering that he also smoked often outside of the show. As he lay dying at the hospital in 1986, Ball went to see him. At that time, she was preparing for another show, Life with Lucy. Arnaz's last words to her were, "I love you too, honey. Good luck with your show." At his funeral, she reportedly wept openly while clasping hands with her second husband, Gary Morton. Before entering the church, she remembered Arnaz by saying, "Just look at the stuff he's done over the years. It's on 3 or 4 times every day. He was a great part of our innovation in this business." Lucille Ball likely found it fitting that she was the last surviving adult cast member of I Love Lucy. But by 1989, at the age of 78, she was tired. She made her last TV appearance that March at the Oscars with her friend Bob Hope. She complained about her wig and commented, "God, I'm so tired of myself." A month later, she gained the strength to join her friend Lee Tannen and spy on a party next door. As Tannen recounted, Lucy was fascinated by the goings-on, commenting on everything and eyeing everybody who, ironically, would have given their eye teeth to meet the crazy redhead on the other side of the wall. Ball never got over her first husband's death, and a few days after the party, she needed emergency heart surgery. When she returned, she was disappointed that she had to stay in a downstairs room instead of her own bedroom while being treated like an invalid. She died just a few days later, on April 26, 1989.
Lucy is gone, but she'll always be with us. I love Lucy. Everybody loves Lucy.
Which famous sci-fi franchise wouldn't exist without Lucille Ball? Which episode of I Love Lucy made television history? And who was Ball's real soulmate? Keep watching for some crazy cool facts about this talented and beautiful Hollywood icon. Desiree Ball gave birth to Lucille Ball on August 6, 1911, in Jamestown, New York. Lucille's father, Henry, was an electrician. Shortly after Lucille was born, the family moved to Montana so Henry could find work, according to biography. Then they relocated to Michigan for a job at the Michigan Bell Company. In 1915, Lucille's father got typhoid fever and passed away. Lucille was not even 4 years old. Some of Lucille's earliest memories took place during that time period. After her father's death, the family moved back to Jamestown, and her mother married a man named Ed Peterson, who didn't like children and didn't want to live with them. As a result, Peterson and Desiree moved to Detroit, while Lucille moved in with her stepfather's parents, and her brother lived with his maternal grandparents. Lucille's life was threadbare as the Petersons couldn't even afford to pay for pencils for school. Most people remember Lucille Ball as a gregarious, outgoing personality, at least in the roles she played on television. But Lucille wasn't an extrovert when she was just starting out in the business.
I know you're not shy.
Yeah, that's it. I just found out. I'm very shy.
She moved back in with her mother at age 11, and by 15 persuaded Desiree Ball to permit her to apply to a New York City drama school. Lucille said of the experience, "I was a tongue-tied teenager spellbound by the school's star pupil, Betty Davis." Davis, of course, became one of film's most notable stars. School administrators eventually told Lucille's mother her daughter was, quote, wasting her time and hours. This did not deter Lucille, and instead of giving up her acting dreams, she stayed in the Big Apple. Lucille got modeling gigs in the late 1920s for fashion designer Hattie Carnegie and Chesterfield cigarettes. She then set her sights on Hollywood, landing a role in Stage Door with Katharine Hepburn and Ginger Rogers. Lucille Ball is synonymous with red hair, but she didn't always have ginger locks. She was a natural brunette and even had blonde hair before hairstylist Sidney Gilderoff made the ingenious move to turn the actress into a redhead, according to Yahoo. And no, Ball didn't wear a wig. However, it was a challenge to maintain her hairstyle. According to one of her stylists, Irma Kuzley, Ball's hair was actually golden apricot, not red. Kuzley explained, "I used regular hair dye to color it and then a henna rinse, which she was famous for. She had a safe of the henna in my garage." Ball discovered the best way to keep her red hair in tip-top condition while spending time in Las Vegas, where she met a wealthy man who offered to send her a large box of henna to make the process easier. Lucille Ball and her husband Desi Arnaz created Desi Studios, which, during the late 1950s, was the top television production company. From producing Ball's namesake show, I Love Lucy, to other classics like Mission Impossible, The Andy Griffith Show, and The Dick Van Dyke Show, Desi Studios had a penchant for choosing projects that challenged cultural and societal norms. It also incorporated the latest technology in its programming. Ball bought Arnaz's interest in the production company in 1962, which made her the first female to lead a major Hollywood studio. She was able to channel her talent into the company during the 1960s when media was evolving. She also set the stage for today's women in entertainment. Ball was a pioneer when she took over Desi Studios, and today's Hollywood stars can credit her for blazing the trail. Lucille Ball appeared in several films in her younger years, but her comedic skills didn't really make an impression until she landed a radio job. The program, My Favorite Husband, was broadcast on CBS Radio. Ball believed the radio show could be converted into a television program, but not everyone was on board. So she and her husband, Desi, created an act they took on the road. Arnaz played with his band while Ball acted out comedy routines. Their act became a hit, and it resulted in the series I Love Lucy. What people may not realize is that Ball was 40 years old when the show first aired. Today, few TV programs are centered on women of that age, and during the 1950s, it was unheard of. However, Ball's talent and vibrant on-screen persona made up for the fact that she was older than her contemporaries, and for Ball to achieve such success with her work later in life was groundbreaking. If you've ever seen an episode of I Love Lucy, you probably laughed at some point. Lucille Ball was a riot in episodes like Job Switching, when she and her friend Ethel worked in a chocolate factory. It's hard to keep a straight face watching the pair stuff chocolate into their mouths and close when the conveyor belt goes faster and faster. The Vitamita Vegemin episode was also hilarious, as Lucy got drunk tasting a health tonic for a commercial. Interestingly, Ball didn't think she was funny. She said as much to Rolling Stone in 1983, explaining, "My writers were funny, my directors were funny, the situations were funny. What I am is brave. I have never been scared. Not when I did movies, certainly not when I was a model, and not when I did I Love Lucy." While she didn't give her comedic skills much credit, Ball was funny, especially in episodes such as Lucy's Italian Movie, in which she stomped grapes and got into a fight while doing so. You may be surprised to learn that in 1936, Lucille Ball registered to vote as a member of the Communist Party. Despite her political leanings, it did not affect her career. Rena Vale, a former screenwriter and investigator for the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, testified that a Communist Party meeting was hosted at the star's home in 1937. Ball was not present at the meeting and claimed she didn't participate in any activities related to the party. However, the FBI determined that she was a delegate for the party's state committee and took part in party-related radio broadcasts in 1940. When pressed about her involvement with the Communist Party, Ball and her husband Desi Arnaz claimed she registered only to please her socialist-leaning grandfather. Arnaz also passionately defended his wife, proclaiming she wasn't and never would be a communist.
I am innocent!
Fortunately for her career, Ball was not blacklisted like so many others in Hollywood were at the time, largely because she was such a beloved actress. Lucille Ball was interested in buying a series so Desilu Studios would have a show to call its own. While several TV programs were filmed by her company, it didn't own most of them. So when producer Herb Solow approached Ball with the sci-fi series Star Trek, she saw an opportunity. Since Ball and Desi Arnaz created the process of syndication or reruns, she had the foresight to see that the same concept would work well with Star Trek the original series. As inverse details, while the original Star Trek only aired for 3 seasons, it truly shined in reruns. Ball had nothing to do with the creative aspects of Star Trek, but she was instrumental in providing its financial backing. TV execs rejected the pilot episode, but Ball was so confident in the show that she paid for a revamped pilot.
I don't believe it.
This type of thing did not happen in 1965 and rarely occurs today. Star Trek The Next Generation actor Gates McFadden narrated the documentary The Center Seat and stated, "Without the bravery and determination of Lucille Ball, who defined Hollywood and expectations, well, Star Trek probably wouldn't exist at all." Celebrity friendships can be fascinating, including the one between Lucille Ball and Betty White, who's known for her roles on The Golden Girls and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. The women met in the late 1950s and instantly fostered a strong connection, with their friendship lasting over 30 years. The pair both worked on radio and television and even owned production companies, a rarity during that era. White talked to The Atlantic about her pal and noted that the redhead was always trying to teach her backgammon. It never quite worked out because Ball wasn't the best teacher. Still, the pair played the game frequently, and it was a lot of fun, according to White. But that's just a small reason why the twosome remained friends for so many years. Ann Dusenberry, who appeared on Super Password with White and Life with Lucy with Ball told Closer, their bond was their common accomplishment as businesswomen in a male-dominated industry. Ball's former co-star Keith Thibodeau, who played Little Ricky on I Love Lucy, claimed the pair were so close because Ball admired White's, quote, fighting spirit. In the early 1950s, the idea of seeing a pregnancy on television was unfathomable. But that all changed with the December 8, 1952 airing of the I Love Lucy episode Lucy is Enceinte on CBS.
Lucy has become a Hollywood legend.
Me, a Hollywood legend.
In the episode, Lucy and Ricky learned they were going to be parents. For the first time in history, a pregnant woman was portrayed on television, a groundbreaking moment for Lucille Ball. However, the word pregnant was never uttered during the episode because it was considered vulgar. At the time, the episode was a bit shocking because of its subject matter, but it paid off in the long run. When little Ricky was born during an episode on January 19, 1953, 44 million viewers watched. To put that in perspective, the #1 show of the first week of December 2021 was NFL Sunday Night Football with 18.5 million viewers. Another way in which Ball broke TV boundaries was by insisting her Cuban immigrant husband Desi play her on-screen husband in I Love Lucy. According to the Television Academy, TV execs feared viewers wouldn't believe a white woman would have such a close relationship with a Hispanic man. But Ball threatened to walk if Arnaz wasn't included. Arnaz helped audiences accept his character because he was an excellent comedian and poked fun at himself. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz divorced after nearly 2 decades together, but the pair reportedly remained soulmates the rest of their lives, according to sources. They had 2 children, but split up in 1960 due to Arnaz's alcoholism and womanizing ways, reports The Guardian. Author and playwright Lee Tannen was friends with Ball and told the publication, "The day Desi died was the day she started dying. It was such a love affair that unquestionably she loved him until the day she died, and I believe he loved her." The Queen of Tuesday, a Lucille Ball story author, Darren Strauss, told CBS News that Ball and Arnaz were a perfect couple who loved each other very much, but they couldn't live together. He believes Arnaz was unequivocally the love of Ball's life. When Lucille Ball first set her sights on Hollywood, she appeared in several films with heavy-hitter co-stars like Henry Fonda, Judy Garland, and Ginger Rogers. Early on in her career, she appeared in quick succession in films such as Roman Scandals, Blood Money, and Kid Millions. She gradually landed larger roles, including 1950s Fancy Pants, alongside Bob Hope. She starred in more than 80 films during her career. While she was making I Love Lucy, she even appeared with husband Desi Arnaz in a few comedies, such as 1954's The Long, Long Trailer. After Ball divorced Arnaz in 1960, she returned to the small screen with The Lucy Show, which aired from 1962 to 1968, and followed it up with Here's Lucy, which aired from 1968 to 1974. Her last TV program, Life with Lucy, was unfortunately a failure and only stayed on air for 2 months in 1986. Neither critics nor viewers liked the show, and it was Ball's last role before she died at the age of 77. Fortunately, Ball's legacy is connected to her most beloved sitcom, I Love Lucy, one of TV's most iconic shows of all time.
Beyond their roles as Lucy and Ethel on 50s TV show I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance were friends to the end, literally. In many ways, life on the set of a TV show is not unlike life in an office. People show up to work on a certain schedule, put in their hours, collect their paycheck, and go home. Meanwhile, workers in the TV industry have to deal with interpersonal relationships between coworkers in much the same way that workers in any other jobs will have to. That means there will be an occasional battle of wills or hurt feelings, and indeed, some people may grow to hate each other. Similarly, the people who work together on the set may find that they become lifelong friends. Such was the case with Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance, according to Showbiz Cheat Sheet. The 2 women were best friends on the screen, and they were best friends in real life as well, up until Vance's death in 1979. When Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance arrived for their first day of work on the set of I Love Lucy back in 1951, Ball was a big-name TV actress, while Vance was mostly known for her work on Broadway, as People reports. Ball would later write in her book that she knew from the moment she met her that she had struck gold. As Showbiz Cheat Sheet explains, Ball wrote, "As far as I was concerned, it was kismet. Viv and I were extraordinarily compatible. Their friendship wasn't just limited to the screen. They were best friends off-screen as well." Ball's daughter, Lucy Arnaz, would later say via Outsider that their friendship was for life. She said, "My mother and Vivian were really good friends in real life, and they adored one another. Vivian was one of the funniest people on the planet, truly, truly funny. And when she would get together with my mother, it was lovely." Of course, all friendships have their ups and downs, and on the set of I Love Lucy, that friendship was tested during the show's final season. At the time, both Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance were on the verge of divorces with husbands with whom they'd spent nearly 20 years.
There are times when married couples let their lives fall into set patterns. That's exactly what's happened to us. Right.
As Showbiz Cheat Sheet says, the 2 went to work one day during a particularly rough patch, both having short tempers while shooting. As Ball said, "One day, Vivian and I had a disagreement on set and stopped speaking. The silence went on much longer than either of us anticipated. It got to be a nuisance, since we were so used to listening carefully to each other's lines and making suggestions." As is often the case with true friendships, the animosity didn't last long. That same day, 1 hour before the performance, Ball finally broke down and talked to Vance about their lines.
Well, I'm sorry sorry, Ethel. I just couldn't stand it any longer. Oh!
They were sitting side by side at a mirror putting their makeup on, and Ball told Vance she didn't think Vance was reading a line quite right. Vance admitted she had a point and asked Ball why she hadn't spoken up earlier. Ball replied, "Well, we weren't speaking, and I'd be damned if I'd tell you." They broke down laughing, and that was that. By 1979, Vivian Vance knew that she was dying from advanced bone cancer. In a truly heartbreaking turn, doctors had originally thought Vance had breast cancer, and as Outsider says, had performed a mastectomy in an attempt to treat her illness. She then went through chemotherapy, but to no effect. This happened over a decade after The Lucy Show finished in 1968, and Ball and Vance remained as inseparable as always. Before Vance died, Ball visited her to see each other one final time at Vance's Belvedere, California home. Vance was brought into the living room, laid on the couch, and she and Ball had lunch together. By all accounts, there was as much grief present as there was love. Paige Peterson, daughter of Vance's landlord, who'd grown close to Vance in her last days, said, "You could hear them laughing, and towards the end there was a lot of sobbing. It was an amazing thing to witness, the love of these two women." Ball was completely inconsolable after Vance died. Ball's daughter, Lucy Arnaz, said, "She cried about losing Viv for months after that. Viv was, in many ways, like a sister to my mother. She could talk to Mom like nobody else, and I don't think my mother could confide in many people the way she would with Viv."
The on-screen relationship of Lucy and Ricky Ricardo was charming and romantic, masking the trouble Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz often struggled with in their off-screen marriage. In true Hollywood fashion, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz met on a movie set. The year was 1940, and the movie was Too Many Girls, a film about an eccentric heiress, played by Ball. But Lucy had seen Desi before. She'd just finished the movie Five Come Back and was in New York City on a promotional tour. The studio urged her to see the stage version of Too Many Girls, which starred a young Arnaz as a football player. Upon seeing Arnaz on stage, Ball was immediately smitten with his good looks, charm, and comedic appeal. However, Arnaz's first impression of Ball went a little differently. Arnaz was already on set for Too Many Girls when Ball came in with smeared makeup and a black eye, looking completely disheveled. Arnaz was taken aback by her appearance, thinking there was no way she was a suitable leading lady.
I said to Mr. Abel, "She's gonna be the engineer. She are you mine."
What Arnaz didn't realize was that Ball had just come from next door, where she was shooting a fight scene for another film. The black eye was fake. Upon seeing Ball later, in costume for their film, Arnaz couldn't believe it was the same person. He was immediately attracted to her. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were married within a year of their first date. As Arnaz explains in his autobiography, a book by Desi Arnaz, it was November 29, 1940, and he'd just been reunited with Ball after being separated due to their busy work schedules. Arnaz came to visit Ball at her New York City hotel during a break between his shows at the Roxy. While there, Arnaz heard Ball give an interview explaining why she and Arnaz wouldn't be getting married. She made every excuse in the book, saying they were too busy and led separate lives. As soon as the interview finished, Arnaz told her the reporter's story was going to flop, considering he'd already arranged for them to get married in Connecticut. The article was published under the title, "Why I Will Always Remain a Bachelor Girl," but she agreed to marry Arnaz. They drove to Greenwich, Connecticut the next morning and eloped. Arnaz forgot the ring, so they had to use a brass one from Woolworth's, which he eventually replaced. They were both very happy. Ball and Arnaz agreed from the beginning that it would be much easier to cultivate a happy, loving marriage if they kept some distance between themselves and the hustle and bustle of Hollywood. Ball wanted to settle down and focus on becoming domesticated, so after just 6 months of marriage, they bought a ranch in California's San Fernando Valley. Arnaz, who grew up on ranches in his native Cuba, immediately took to the life, building a swimming pool and planting tree crops on their 5-acre property. They called the ranch, and would eventually call their production company, Desilu, a portmanteau of their names. Yet, while they shared so much, one thing they kept separate was their finances. This was largely because Ball was frugal with her money, while Arnaz tended to make extravagant purchases. At first, everything seemed perfect for Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz at Desilu Ranch, but the honeymoon didn't last. They had their hands full keeping up with expenses, and they quarreled over their animals. Arnaz wanted to kill their livestock for food, which upset Ball and prompted her to call him a murderous monster.
She said all my chickens died of natural causes.
In 1941, Ball experienced the first of several miscarriages, which affected both her and Arnaz deeply. They were both struggling in their acting careers, and Ball even attempted to give Arnaz private acting lessons. In May 1943, at the height of World War II, Arnaz was drafted into the U.S. Army. Ball thought it might help cool his temper. Initially, Arnaz was stationed close to Desi in Van Nuys, California, to help provide entertainment for new recruits. He injured his knee during basic training, which prevented him from serving overseas. While it allowed him to stay in the safety of California, it upset Arnaz that he couldn't fight overseas for his adopted country. Even though Desi Arnaz was stationed just down the street from his home during the war, his relationship with wife Lucille Ball was deteriorating. Arnaz had affairs with multiple women while he was living on the army base, and he would often visit mistresses instead of his wife while on leave.
Hey, what's that for?
That's for being a big two-timer, you Cuban heel!
Ball found out about these liaisons through the tabloids, and in retaliation, began seeing other men. By 1944, Arnaz stopped coming home, prompting Ball to file for divorce. But she was still in love with Arnaz. She wanted to give him time to work things out before the split was final. After they talked things over, Arnaz's behavior markedly improved, at least for a time. Ball desperately wanted to co-star with Arnaz in a movie, but after his discharge from the army, he returned to his first love as a bandleader. In 1949, Arnaz and Ball renewed their marriage vows at a Catholic church, with Arnaz promising to clean up his act. In the spring of 1950, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were hard at work trying to convince the executives at CBS to adopt the radio program she was starring in, My Favorite Husband, into a TV series featuring her and Arnaz together.
A guy who's been raised in show business, and he wants nothing more than to get away from it and have a normal home life, and he marries a girl who's dying to get into show business.
While performing their vaudeville act to impress CBS executives, Ball experienced another miscarriage. However, just a few months later, Ball and Arnaz found themselves expecting again. The following summer, in July 1951, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz welcomed baby Lucy Arnaz to the family. Initially, they had agreed to name the baby Susan. At the last second, however, Arnaz changed the name on the birth certificate to Lucy, which shocked and delighted Ball when she found out. Just over 6 months later, in February 1952, Ball was pregnant again. Her pregnancy was written into I Love Lucy as a major plot point, and their son was born on the same day as the episode showing the birth of Lucy's TV son aired.
Ricky, this is it.
This is it!
On the show, he was Ricky Jr., but in the Ball-Arnaz household, he was Desi Arnaz Jr. Before Lucille Ball became one of the biggest international TV stars of the 1950s, she struggled to find herself on screen. Between 1948 and 1950, she starred on the popular radio program My Favorite Husband. Ball wanted to take My Favorite Husband from the radio to the screen, not only because it was more lucrative, but also because she saw it as a way to save her marriage to Desi. It was around this time that they renewed their vows, with Arnaz promising to change his philandering ways. Working together seemed like a perfect idea at the time. Ball and Arnaz would be together both on screen and off, and they could keep their marriage going. Of course, neither of them could have foreseen the incredible hit that I Love Lucy would become. The show ran from 1951 to 1957, producing 180 episodes over 6 seasons and becoming one of the most beloved shows in American TV history. Like their characters, Lucy and Ricky, Ball and Arnaz stayed together throughout the show's entire run. In 1936, when Lucille Ball was in her mid-20s and before she met Desi Arnaz, she made a seemingly harmless decision. A family friend was running for city council office that year, and Ball registered as a member of the Communist Party in order to vote for him. Ball registered as a communist to appease her grandfather. It had nothing to do with the party's politics or ideology. In 1940, she gave vocal support to 2 colleagues who were accused of being communists, which sparked the revelation of her 1936 registration. Things stayed mostly silent until 1953, when she was ordered to appear before the notorious House Un-American Activities Committee. She denied any communist affiliation, but the press got word of it and accused her of being a communist. While this might not seem like a big deal now, at the height of the Cold War with Russia, it could have devastated her reputation and forced her onto the blacklist. Ball and Arnaz were preparing to film the inaugural episode of I Love Lucy, and the scandal threatened to end the show before it even started. However, Arnaz stood by Ball and gave a rousing and emotional speech to the studio audience, winning them over.
The only thing red about her was her hair, and even that was not legitimate.
Arnaz himself was enraged over the accusations, particularly because, as he noted in his autobiography, A Book by Desi Arnaz, his family had struggled against the Bolsheviks in his native Cuba in the 1930s. As Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz continued to entertain audiences with their on-screen image as the Ricardo family on I Love Lucy, their off-screen reality began to deteriorate as time went on. One of the biggest factors in their relationship's decline was Arnaz's unhealthy use of alcohol. As Coyne Stevens Sanders explains in Desilu, the story of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, his alcohol use became so severe that it started to hurt his performance on the show, making Ball more and more upset. Years later, even his daughter could feel the pain that it caused the family and her mother, and it also led to Arnaz's increasing infidelity. He started to gamble more, which Ball did not approve of. According to Desilu Productions executive Martin Leeds, Arnaz resented the fact that Ball was the ultimate star of the show at his expense.
No matter how hard he worked or what a great businessman he was, she was the clown. The show was built around her.
As the show and Ball became more successful, his drinking increased in tandem, along with the disintegration of their relationship. By the end of the 1950s, after the original I Love Lucy show had ended and Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz had shifted to shooting one-hour specials, it was clear the relationship had run its course. As Ball recalls in her autobiography, Love, Lucy, Arnaz was constantly under the influence of alcohol and they were always fighting. It got to the point where they just stopped speaking to each other, and Ball realized that they were probably not the greatest fit as a couple in the first place. They had wildly different ideas about social life, with Ball being far more conservative than the over-the-top Arnaz. She made the decision to divorce him in late 1959, and on March 3, 1960, she filed for divorce again, this time for good. Arnaz had been the one to ask her to do it, as Ball found herself unable to end the relationship herself. They were actually filming a scene on the day she filed the papers. That would be the final time they would work together professionally. Like she did in 1944, Ball cited extreme mental cruelty as the grounds for ending the marriage. After years of embarrassment and emotional distress, it was just too much for her to put up with anymore. Today, the title I Love Lucy is so iconic that most people ignore the fact that the actress always went by the name Lucille Ball instead of Lucy. As Desi Arnaz explained in his autobiography, A Book by Desi Arnaz, the reason for this is actually much darker than you might think. Even though Arnaz constantly cheated on Ball during their marriage, he was also incredibly possessive.
My favorite redhead, the vice president of Desilu Productions Incorporated. I am the president.
Arnaz actually refused to call her by the name Lucille and started using Lucy within just a few months of their dating. For some reason, Arnaz was upset that men Ball had previously dated had called her by her preferred name. He wanted to use Lucy because he felt that made it special and unique to their relationship. Unfortunately, Arnaz's jealousy over other suitors did not translate into him becoming a reliable and trustworthy husband himself. Following their divorce, both Lucy and Desi remarried, Arnaz to Edith Mack Hirsch and Ball to Gary Morton. In 1985, Hirsch died of cancer, and the next year, Arnaz himself was diagnosed with lung cancer. Ball found out about his diagnosis when she called to wish him a happy 69th birthday. She was devastated by the news. Though they initially were estranged leading up to and following their divorce, their feelings softened in the decades after and they managed to retain a friendship. The last time they spoke was November 30th, 1986, exactly 46 years after their wedding. Ball was one of the last people Arnaz spoke to before dying. Her final words to him were simple and heartbreaking.
She said, "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you."
He told her he loved her. Desi Arnaz died 2 days later on December 2nd. Lucille Ball was one of the few to attend his funeral. If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP, 1-800-662-4357.